the prospects for a productivity resurgence may seem grim. After all, the past decade has featured plenty of technological fatalism. In 2013, Peter Thiel, a venture capitalist, mused of the technological advances of the moment that we wanted flying cars, instead we got 140 characters. Robert Gordon of Northwestern University has echoed this sentiment, speculating that humanity might never again invent something so transformative as the flush toilet. Throughout the decade, data largely supported the views of the pessimists. What is more, some studies of past pandemics and analyses of the economic effects of this one suggest that COVID-19 might make the productivity performance worse. According to research by the World Bank, countries struck by pandemic outbreaks in the 21st century, not including COVID, experienced a marked decline in labor productivity of 9% after 3 years relative to unaffected countries. And yet, stranger things have happened. The brutal years of the 1930s were followed by the most extraordinary economic boom in history. A generation ago, economists had nearly abandoned hope of ever matching the post-war performance when a computer-powered productivity explosion took place. And today there are tantalizing hints that the economic and social traumas of the first 2 decades of this century may soon give way to a new period of economic dynamism. Productivity is the magic elixir of economic growth. Increases in the size of the labor force or the stock of capital can raise output, but the effect of such contributions diminishes unless better ways are found to make use of those resources. Productivity growth, wringing more output from available resources, is the ultimate source of long-run increases in incomes. It's not everything, as Paul Krugman, a Nobel economics laureate, once noted, but in the long run it's almost everything. Economists know less about how to boost productivity than they would like, however. Increases in labor productivity, that is, more output per worker per hour, seem to follow improvements in educational levels, increases in investment, which raise the level of capital per worker, and adoption of new innovations. A rise in total factor productivity, or the efficiency with which an economy uses its productive inputs, may require the discovery of new ways of producing goods and services, or the reallocation of scarce resources from low productivity firms and places to high productivity ones. Globally, productivity growth decelerated sharply in the 1970s from scorchingly high rates in the post-war decades. A burst of higher productivity growth in the rich world, led by America, unfolded from the mid-1990s into the early 2000s. Emerging markets, too, enjoyed rapid productivity growth in the decade prior to the global financial crisis, powered by high levels of investment and an expansion of trade which brought more sophisticated techniques and technologies to the developing economy participants in global supply chains. Since the crisis, however, a broad-based and stubbornly persistent slowdown in productivity growth has set in. See Chart 1. About 70% of the world's economies have been affected, according to the World Bank. Accounting for the slowdown is a fraught process. The World Bank reckons that slowing trade growth and fewer opportunities to adopt and adapt new technology from richer countries may have helped depress productivity advances in the emerging world. Across all economies, sluggish investment in the aftermath of the global financial crisis looks a culprit, a particular problem in places with aging and shrinking workforces. Yet while these headwinds surely matter, the bigger question is why new technologies like improved robotics, cloud computing and artificial intelligence have not prompted more investment and higher productivity growth. Broadly speaking, 3 hypotheses compete to explain these doldrums. One, voiced by the techno-pessimists, insists that for all the enthusiasm about world-changing technologies, recent innovations are simply not as transformative as the optimists insist. Though it is possible that this will turn out to be correct, continued technological progress makes it look ever less plausible as an explanation for the doldrums. AI may not have transformed the world economy at the dramatically disruptive pace some expected 5 to 10 years ago, but it has become significantly, and in some cases startlingly, more capable. GPT-3, a language prediction model developed by OpenAI, a research firm, has demonstrated a remarkable ability to carry on conversations, draft long texts, and write code in surprisingly human-like fashion. Though the potential of the web to support an economy in which the constraints of distance do not bind has long underwhelmed, cloud computing and video conferencing proved their economic worth over the past year, enabling vast amounts of productive activity to continue with scarcely an interruption despite the shuttering of many offices. New technologies are clearly able to do more than has generally been asked of them in recent years. That strengthens the case for a second explanation for slow productivity growth, chronically weak demand. In this view, expressed most vociferously by Larry Summers of Harvard University, government's inability to stoke enough spending constrains investment and growth. More public investment is needed to unlock the economy's potential. Chronically low rates of interest and inflation, limp private investment and lackluster wage growth since the turn of the millennium clearly indicate that demand has been inadequate for most of the past 2 decades. Whether this meaningfully undercuts productivity growth is difficult to say. But in the years before the pandemic, as unemployment fell and wage growth ticked up, American labor productivity growth appeared to be accelerating, from an annual increase of just 0.3% in 2016 to a rise of 1.7% in 2019. The fastest pace of growth since 2010. But a third explanation provides the strongest case for optimism. It takes time to work out how to use new technologies effectively. AI is an example of what economists call a general-purpose technology, like electricity, which has the potential to boost productivity across many industries. But making best use of such technologies takes time and experimentation. This accumulation of know-how is really an investment in intangible capital. Recent work by Eric Brynjolfsson and Daniel Rock, of MIT, and Chad Syverson, of the University of Chicago, argues that this pattern leads to a phenomenon they call the productivity J-curve. As new technologies are first adopted, firms shift resources towards investment in intangibles, developing new business processes. This shift in resources means that firm output suffers in a way that cannot be fully explained by shifts in the measured use of labor and tangible capital, and which is thus interpreted as a decline in productivity growth. Later, as intangible investments bear fruit, measured productivity surges because output rockets upward in a manner unexplained by measured inputs of labor and tangible capital.